Have you ever thought, we used to be so close and now we're becoming strangers? For many couples in midlife, the strain doesn't arrive as one big problem. It shows up as shorter tempers, less patience, less intimacy, and more misunderstandings, and fewer repairs. Today we're talking about how changing hormones affect emotional availability, communication, desire, and connection, and what couples can do to stay on the same team during this season. Welcome to All About You. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, GP and women's health advocate. Every week, I bring you evidence-based conversations to help you navigate midlife with clarity, compassion, and confidence. My guest is Natalie King, Senior Clinical Psychologist at the Reed Clinic Psychology, with over 25 years' experience supporting individuals and couples. Natalie is trained in the Gottman method, a research-based approach to relationship health, and brings a grounded, practical lens to how emotional and relational patterns shift during midlife transitions. Today, we're focusing on something that's rarely discussed openly: how perimenopause affects not just women, but their relationships. This conversation is about understanding what's changing, why couples can feel more disconnected during midlife, and how to rebuild closeness rather than drifting apart. Natalie, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming in. I'm really excited about this conversation. I absolutely love the training that you've done. Well, you've done lots of training, but I love that you use the Gottman method in your work with couples. Mm-hmm. So we know that most of our audience is female, but I know there will be some women who will really want to be sharing this episode today. Mm-hmm. So we know that perimenopause is often framed as it just being all about women's health, and it's a women's health issue. But from a psychological point of view, it's definitely a relationship transition as well. Mm. And in fact, I always say menopause and perimenopause are they're like human issues, because the reality is, even if you don't have a partner, you've probably got a mother or a sister or a work colleague. But I'd love to know, from a psychology point of view, how you see perimenopause and menopause playing out in your day-to-day practice.
Yeah, so I think I'm so glad we're starting at the place of it being a transition, and a relationship transition particularly, because it very much, yes, it's happening to the female partner in the relationship, but it's also happening to their partner, whether it's a same-sex couple or a male-female relationship. Their partner's going through it as well, and the relationship as an entity is going through it as well. So looking at that idea of this affecting the whole system, I think is really, really valuable. In terms of how it presents in practice, I primarily work with couples, and so it's sort of always top of mind for me these days. I have to admit, I've been woefully underinformed until recently, but these days always top of mind as to whether menopause is playing a role in what's happening for the couple, and bringing that conversation into the room if they're not already having it, because there's just no point working on a relationship situation, a couple dynamic, if perimenopause is at play and we're pretending that it isn't, because then we're not really working with the real situation. So it's really important if a couple are in that sort of age group where that might be part of the picture. It's really important to find that out and incorporate that into the therapy that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I congratulate you, because it is amazing that you have educated yourself around the topic, because unfortunately, so many women obviously go to see various health professionals, and they end up on a trajectory where no one is even considering that actually what the root cause of the issue might be. Yeah. So whenever you see couples where someone is in that perimenopausal transition, is there a pattern that you're seeing, or a number of patterns that you keep seeing repeatedly? You're like, I keep seeing this.
I think as we all are starting to realise, the perimenopause journey can present so differently. So I don't know that there's a particular pattern in terms of symptoms or in terms of impact. But I guess if we're going to look broadly, what we see is one of maybe three things. Either a relationship that's previously been really strong starts to sort of struggle all of a sudden, or a relationship that has been struggling gets a whole lot worse, or a relationship that's kind of not been great, but the female partner's kind of been rolling with it and kind of making the best of it, can then all of a sudden capitulate because she no longer has the capacity or the desire to make the best of it, kind of thing. So they're probably the three patterns that we tend to see for couples sort of in this age range, if you like, or in this stage of life.
And you talked a little bit about trying to get openness between the couple about what's going on. Do you feel that it still has the same taboo to say you're in perimenopause or menopause that maybe it did 5 or 10 years ago?
Look, I think it's changing rapidly, and I think people like yourself and all the other primarily women out there that are doing so much research and so much education and so much work in the area are really helping to make that happen. And it's so important because first of all, if couples aren't aware that it's happening, if they're sort of in the throes of perimenopause particularly and they're not aware that that's at play, then they're going to start attaching meaning to what's happening. So if the female partner's feeling angrier, feeling sadder, feeling more anxious, and she doesn't realise that it's her hormones that are creating that, she's going to be looking for reasons in her environment to explain it. And, couples, their lives are so intertwined, it's not hard for the partner to become the focus of, maybe you're the reason I'm feeling like this. Maybe we're not so good anymore. Maybe this relationship has run its course. Or similarly, the male partner, if he doesn't realise that the changes he's seeing in his wife or his female partner are due to these hormonal shifts, then he might be thinking, geez, she used to be really nice and she's not so nice anymore. What's going on with her, kind of thing. So they can start to tell themselves these stories about what's happening to their partner, to their relationship. And those stories become the reality if no one sort of steps in and recognises, hang on, there's more to it. There's more going on here. It's not just about who I am as a person or who we are as a couple that's creating these dramas that we're sort of suddenly having.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I see is so women complaining of new onset anxiety, or maybe they've always been a bit anxious, but it's now over the top anxiety, and they can suddenly, they don't want to drive their car anymore, or they don't want to go to things, or they're maybe being overly anxious about, maybe they've got a teenager who's driving and they're freaking out all the time. And that can be difficult for the partner to navigate, like, what is happening? This person didn't used to be like this, and now, she doesn't want to go anywhere, or she doesn't want to do anything. Or, in the same vein, someone who's suddenly got no energy or no motivation, who used to be really sociable. And they used to have like this very sort of active social life. They go out and meet other friends and couples. And now, she doesn't seem to want to do it anymore. And I think all of these things, just are like little, I would say, like, can be death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah. And then it's also, a partner who's not sleeping, and suddenly, his snoring becomes, which maybe has always been there, but it's suddenly now becoming really annoying and really irritating. I have to say, I will admit to that one. I was like, you're snoring. But I think, there's so many things where, if someone is just not sleeping, they're feeling anxious, they've got no energy, it's very hard to show up to the relationship feeling like you've got anything to give.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think really happens for couples is a lot of couples don't give each other a whole lot of grace. So if we catch up with a friend and they're not themselves, oh my gosh, are you okay? What's happening? Or perhaps sort of a bit of extended family members, they're really going through something right now. We need to be extra careful with them. But with our partners, we often have pretty high expectations of them, and sort of wanting them to just fit in neatly and comfortably into our life and don't make our life any more difficult than it needs to be, sort of thing. And so I think think that when one member of the couple does start to experience some things or start to behave a bit differently, it can be easy for that to become a source of tension or a source of conflict rather than a source of, oh, hang on, this is weird. What's going on here? And I guess that's what I would encourage anyone who loves a woman in her perimenopause age range, or even just knows a woman, if they start to see sort of behaviours that are a bit different or reactions that are a bit different or things start to feel a bit strange, to try and be curious about that. Don't be offended by it straight up. Try and think about, hang on, what might be going on here, and have a conversation about it. Because you're right, all those sorts of things that you're talking about, they can sneak up on you. And if you don't mind me sharing a little bit of my own experience, and this goes back to me being woefully underinformed, which in hindsight I'm quite embarrassed about as a therapist, as a psychologist. As I was approaching sort of mid to late 40s, I was looking out for being hot and being cranky, and I wasn't either of those things. And so I was like, oh, I'm good. It's not happening to me yet. But quietly on the side, I was getting a lot more anxious. My self-confidence was decreasing rapidly, and all this other stuff was kind of going on. And it wasn't until it sort of, I guess, reached a crisis point that I was able to go, hang on, maybe there's more to this story than just getting hot and getting cranky kind of thing. And so really, I think spreading that word and having people being more and more educated about what to look for is really going to equip them to catch this stuff much sooner. And as soon as a couple knows, this is the space we're working in, they're already miles ahead in terms of being able to come together and work through it as a team, rather than letting those changes become this sort of friction point that creates conflict and distance between them.
Yeah. They talk a lot about, that this like estrogen veil is removed, and that women's ability to, tolerate things or put up with things or just want to nurture always and sort of forgive everything becomes a lot less. Is that something that you witness in practice, that women are just like, right, I'm kind of done with some of this?
Yeah. Oh, look, I think there's a lot of oomph to that phenomena, because it definitely starts to happen. And so what we need couples to be able to do is to be able to be open to those changes, because quite often what it means is a shift in roles. So a huge part of our relationships is the roles that we play, and there's no rules as to how each couple needs to arrange it, but each couple tends to have their system as to who is more of the hands-on nurturer, who's bringing the bins down the driveway, who's earning the money, who's parenting the kids. And these days couples are sharing most of that stuff a lot more equally. But there is still things like that kind of mental load that does often fall a little bit more to the female partner. And so being able to sort of sit down together and go, look, we've always done it this way, but now that's not working for me so much anymore. I think we need to realign things, and we need to shake it up and start doing things a little bit differently. Having both of them being willing to have that conversation and willing to work together to look at how things need to look now is super, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think you're being, I'm sorry to say, very kind, that it's often more equally shared. I would dispute that a little bit in terms of the patients that I see. I think women do absolutely carry more of that load in terms of, well, I think the research tells us that in terms of even housework and, often still working a lot, and, kids, and the mental load of who's booking the dental appointment for the kids, and who went to the orthodontist, and did somebody pick up the dry cleaning, and did somebody send grandma a birthday card. Like, that does tend to be the woman, and I think eventually it takes its toll.
Definitely. And I think we're in that funny transition period, like as a society, because it wasn't that long ago that the roles were very clearly defined, male and female. And the female did have sort of all of those roles, but she wasn't leaving the house to work. She wasn't bringing in the money. That was sort of the man's role. And we are, I think, in that funny period where men are doing a lot more of the hands-on parenting, women are doing a lot more of the income earning, so the roles are being a lot more shared. But you're right, I think there's those hangovers from those early days where it is still the female who tends to be the one that that carries the big picture of it all, if you like.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm interested to know, and I won't be around to see, whether in 100 years it's kind of settled out and it really is equal in that respect. But definitely for now, there is some of those sort of hangovers. And you're right, it does get very overwhelming. And I see that in couples of all ages, particularly sort of even younger couples with younger kids. Menopause isn't even on their radar at this point, but it still can be sort of a very overwhelming situation for the person who's carrying that load. And then add menopause into the mix a little bit down the track, and it can get to the point where it becomes unworkable. And especially when you add brain fog and some memory difficulties and all those other things that can come along, you can start to feel like I actually don't want to do this anymore. I can't handle it anymore. And I'm actually no longer as effective as I was before, which can be really tough on women to have to sort of face that feeling that perhaps they're not as capable as they were before. Now, we all know that that's not the case. It just needs some reshifting and some changing up and looking at it differently. But I think it can shake some of your identity to recognise, hey, I need to do things differently to how I've always done them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that I do have quite a few couples will come to see me, particularly for a new patient appointment. And one of the things that a lot of the partners will often say is that they're struggling a lot with feeling rejected, and they feel really pushed away, that their partner just doesn't seem to be as interested in them anymore. Can you explain what's sort of happening there?
So it's really, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's something that I've learned through my role working with couples, is how sensitive a lot of men are. And I don't know that they talk about it very much, and so people don't necessarily pick it up. But very easily men can feel rejected and very quickly go to, she doesn't love me anymore, she's not attracted to me anymore, I'm not appealing to her anymore. And the tricky thing is that they often won't say it in those words. They'll often either just shut it down and withdraw, or they'll get frustrated and annoyed and sort of maybe lash out a little bit in response to those hurt feelings. But we know that those feelings are happening. And so just as we said at the very beginning, I really want couples to be thinking about this thing is happening to both of us. And so as much as the female partner needs some TLC and needs a lot of understanding and needs a lot of space to manage what's happening to her, it's really valuable if she's able to also keep an eye on what is happening to him, and if he's able to be open and have a platform to be able to share how he's feeling. So again, they can come together and kind of manage that together. So one thing I sort of talk with all couples about, but in this situation, a woman going through perimenopause, is like, if you've got something going on and you know that's going to make you a bit more sensitive, or you know that it's going to be a bit of a tough day, give him a heads up. Like, don't just sit there and wait for him to screw up and then let loose on him. Like, tell him, hey, listen, I'm not myself today. I'm feeling pretty edgy, just try not to take anything personally that I say to you today, that kind of thing. And ideally, he will then say, he won't go, oh, all right, well, I'm going to the pub, ring me when you're better. Hopefully he'll say, what do you need? And she might need space, she might need comfort, she might need them to spend the day together, whatever it is. Hopefully they then come together. But yeah, we want them really, that sense of really keeping each other informed and really working together to minimise the impact of these changes that are being experienced.
Yeah, and on that note, I think it can be, really helpful in a relationship for them to know in perimenopause maybe where people are in their cycle, if they're still having a cycle, because we know that classically everyone feels a bit tireder and grumpier just before their period, but that can become much more, prolonged. There can be sometimes people say they have 2 full rotten weeks beforehand. And I think just keeping your partner informed of where you are, and also, to be honest, a lot of women have terribly painful, heavy periods that they're also trying to navigate. And I think just maybe having your partner's back a little bit and, showing a little bit of extra TLC at that time, looking after her, and also just being a little bit understanding that, she's having a lot of physical discomfort as well. This episode is brought to you by my 16-week Rediscover You program, designed specifically for women navigating the challenges of perimenopause and menopause. If you're dealing with disrupted sleep, mood changes, or unexplained weight gain, this evidence-based program combines medical guidance, practical tools, and a supportive community to help you take control of your health. Women have reported significant improvements in symptom management of sleep quality and overall well-being. As an All About You listener, when you mention the podcast, you'll gain priority access for our next intake. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and join. I'd love to help you rediscover the vibrant, confident version of yourself. I know that we are talking, at the heart of all of this, of course, is communication. One of the things that women will say to me is that they know they themselves are communicating in a different way. They're often less patient, they're more reactive, and they'll often say that they are feeling at times ashamed of how they've spoken to their partner or spoken to their children, because they know that they are kind of being over the top in their reaction to things. Well, what's going on there? And I suppose, how do we help couples make this not have a long-term and really catastrophic impact on a relationship? Because if someone is always biting your head off or always jumping down your throat, or you feel like you can never do anything right, like it does become a bit exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it does. And I guess in terms of what's going on there, you're probably better to answer that question than me, perhaps, in terms of the physiology that's happening for the woman. So the changes that are happening in her that make her less tolerant, that make her perhaps a little quicker to react, that it's sort of almost like her threat system or her nervous system is just that little bit more on edge. And so she's going to be reacting to things a lot more harshly. For some people, like I said, for me, that wasn't the case. So it didn't tip me off that I had stuff going on. But for some people, that's certainly the case. I think. Sorry, I just lost myself. What was the second part of that question?
God, my brain's like the building as well. And the second part of the question was,
and how do couples stop that from being?
Yes.
Sorry. And so I think what's super, super important, obviously, whenever we're interacting with one another, we want couples to be trying to be as respectful and gentle in their communication as they possibly can. But we don't have what we know about communication is that the repairing of a miscommunication is just as valuable as getting it right in the first place. So if we've got a situation where a woman is being a bit harsher, being a bit more reactive, and she's laying in bed that night reflecting on the day going, oh, that wasn't great. Well, having that conversation at that point, hey, today when you asked me where the shoes were and I kind of barked at you that they were in the cupboard where they always are, you didn't deserve that. That was pretty harsh. I'm sorry. I think that was my lack of estrogen talking. Little repairs like that can happen regularly throughout the day are really, really valuable. And John Gottman sort of talks about that. It's less about the fight that happens in the first place and more about the way that gets repaired and that repair being meaningful. That's super, super important. And so for I guess the couples, for her to have the humility to be able to say, hey, that was a bit rough, you didn't deserve that. And then for him to have the grace to say, no worries, I know it's a tough time, all good, and let it go, would be kind of what we'd be aiming for there.
Yeah, I love that. So really what we're saying is that no one can have perfect communication. That's just the bottom line. But, you can navigate this sort of hopefully safely and strongly ultimately if there is, as you say, the grace to, I suppose, say sorry and for the other person to accept it and it not to lead into a whole big,
Exactly. Yeah. And to do those, to not wait and have one big conversation every month.
Yes.
To have those little check-ins, to have those little touch touch points where you're sort of checking in with each other, you're making your little apologies, you're sharing some appreciations, and just sort of continuing to maintain that connection. So one of the things that we talk about in relationships is the friendship of the relationship. And that's kind of the how you get along with each other, how you interact with each other on a daily basis, how you enjoy one another, what you like about each other. That's sort of really the basis of the relationship itself. And couples who are going through any kind of transition, whether it's going from dating to living together or being married, whether it's becoming parents, whether it's going through perimenopause, couples who are able to really sort of maintain that strong sense of friendship in the relationship do a whole lot better, because they are willing to be gracious with one another. They are more open to sort of letting some of that hard stuff go by the wayside, because they know at the core, hey, this is the person that I love and I want to spend my time with. They're a living, breathing human being. They don't need to be perfect. We just need to get through this together. So that's the other, I guess, main part of the work I do with couples is, yes, we want to be looking at that communication, but we also really want to be looking at how can you guys stay good friends through all of this? What can you be doing to make sure that you're staying on each other's side and that you still like each other? And that's going to get them a really long way to being able to sort of, I don't like using the word tolerate because that makes it sound like someone's doing something really bad, but being able to roll with those changes and sort of get through it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so can you give me some suggestions of how you would get the couples that you work with to approach that?
So it's very personal to each couple. So it depends on what they like to do together. But usually if I was, say, running a session around strengthening the friendship of the relationship with a couple, then I'd be looking, what did you used to do when you first started dating? What have you not had time to do for a little while when you've been busy with kids and jobs and all that sort of stuff? Can you build some of that back into your relationship if you've sort of dropped it off? Or what are some new horizons? Because we also need to be mindful that during perimenopause, the female partner's capacity or interest in doing what they've always done might be changing. And so it can be about getting a little bit creative. The main thing is that they're looking for some way to spend time together where they can just be themselves and they can just enjoy each other. So lots of couples find even just going for a walk for 20 minutes a day can really make a big difference to their relationship. There's not a lot of pressure. They're just walking. It's a really good opportunity to sort of check in with one another and have a chat. So yeah, lots of couples find that. Some couples join the gym together. Some couples have the beach. Like we're so lucky to live with such beautiful beaches. So a lot of couples will find sitting on the sand together, just looking out at the ocean, can be a really nice time to sort of just settle and relax and enjoy each other. So anything like that they've either previously enjoyed or they think they could enjoy is a really good way to just cement that opportunity to connect. And I think couples too, we talk about that idea of being taken for granted. I think what can often happen is couples will tend to put everybody else first, put the kids first, put the in-laws first, put the parents first, put the friends first, put work first. And if I've got anything left over for you at the end of the day, then that's good, I'll talk to you. And I really try and get couples to flip that on its head and recognise we're actually the core here. We're the core of our little family, and our kids will do best if we're strong. So I actually want couples to put their relationship right up near the top of the list, if not at the top of the list, and make sure that they're carving out some time to have the difficult chats that need to be had sometimes and to really be enjoying each other and spending that time together so that it's not an afterthought at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did mention earlier, sometimes we don't show the same patience for our partner as we probably would speak to anyone else. And I think we can all probably acknowledge that one, that we probably are a bit kinder to other people.
Yeah. And I'd love to know, I haven't worked out the mechanics of that. I assume it's just a familiarity thing, a comfort thing, and I think a lack of recognition of how important nurturing that relationship is. So I still remember a client giving me a beautiful analogy. This was years ago and I use it all the time. And he said, if, you work really hard to get your dream job, and as soon as you get that dream job, you don't just sit back at the desk, put your feet up and go, fantastic, I've got this job now, I can relax. You get in there and you work hard and you make sure you do a good job of it. And he's like, relationships are like that. And I was like, yes, they are. That's amazing.
Such a good analogy.
So when you've found this special person that you're choosing to spend your life with, you don't want to then just sit back and hope for the best. You want to take steps and make effort to ensure that you're investing in that relationship so that it stays healthy and it stays well. And it's not so much that like relationships should be hard work, but it's just about prioritizing and putting your attention where it needs to be. And so if you can muster up the ability to be polite to the person that runs their shopping trolley into you at Coles, well, you can muster up the ability to be polite to your partner when they accidentally do the same thing. And that's the sort of thing that we don't do. If someone runs into us, oh, no worries, that's all good. Whereas if our partner does, what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah.
kind of thing.
You're absolutely right.
So we want couples to be comfortable with one another, of course, but that sense of saving the best of myself for you is something I really want people to think about, rather than saving the best of myself for everybody else and you get the dregs kind of thing.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about how we should communicate. What are the patterns that you see that people present with in reality, especially during this time of life?
So I'm going to get a little bit technical with you, if that's okay.
All right, we'll have a bit of technicality.
So in the Gottman method, the Gottmans and their amazing team of people.
I'm going to stop you there.
Okay.
So can you tell our listeners, because I love the Gottman method, but I think probably there'll be lots of people who have never even heard of it.
Okay.
So will you start by telling us what the Gottman method is?
Certainly. So the Gottman method is a relationship therapy approach, and it's called the Gottman method because it's based on the work of Dr. John Gottman and Dr. Julie Gottman. Initially, it started with John Gottman doing research only, and as the story goes, he met Julie Schwartz, who was a clinical psychologist. They fell in love, got married. She's now Julie Gottman, and at some point she said to him, when are you going to use all this research that you're doing to help couples? And he's actually a mathematician at heart. And so his first reaction, again, as the story goes, was, why would I do that? But he accepted her influence. And along the way, they then started to look at, okay, what have we been learning about relationships and how can we turn this into a therapy model where we can help couples who are struggling? And look, I love pretty much everything about the Gottman method, but what I like about it most is that they've studied couples who are struggling, but more importantly, they've studied thousands of couples who are doing well, who are just naturally saying, hey, we're happy together. And they've looked at what are those couples doing? What do they all have in common? And these are real couples living in the real world, facing real challenges. What do they all have in common that must be working? And how can we help couples who are struggling do more of that? So the basis of the model doesn't come from a bunch of academics sitting in a room. The basis of the model comes from what real couples are saying they do that's working. And so the Gottman method essentially is a therapeutic approach based on all of that research that's been done for over 40 years now on relationships and how they work and don't work. So one of the sort of main components of that model is what's called the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And that's the Gottmans. They have some great terminology, really sticks in your head. The 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse is named, it's a biblical reference. The 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse are the 4 things in the Bible that are going to happen before the end of the world. I think, don't quote me exactly on that. That's a very rough interpretation. But when we're talking about the Gottman method, what we're talking about is 4 communication behaviours that have been identified that if they continue to happen in a relationship long term, then that relationship will be at significant risk of ending. So that's hence the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And so what those 4 behaviours are, the first one is criticism. And that's pretty much how it sounds. It's when you express a need to your partner, but you do it by attacking their behaviour, their choices, their personality. So all relationships need to have a complaints department. You need to be able to say, hey, this isn't working for me, or I need something different here. But if we do that in a way that makes our partner feel bad about themselves, or we kind of get them in trouble for what's not working, then they're going to be a lot less open to working with us on the solution. So that's our first horseman, criticism. The second one is defensiveness, which kind of they go hand in hand. You know, if you're feeling criticised or if you're being criticised, it's fairly normal to then become defensive. And defensiveness is basically batting away your partner's complaint. So your partner makes a complaint, and rather than going, okay, I need to hear that, I need to understand that you've got some needs here and I need to work with that, the defensive response just bats it away. You counterattack. Oh, well, you know, maybe I did leave the wet towels on the floor, which is what the partner's complaining about, but you didn't put petrol in the car and I was late for work, and how many times have I asked you not to do that? And you can just see how that then just becomes a very unhelpful conversation.
What about the person who just walks off in the middle of is that defensiveness as well?
No, so that's horseman number 4.
Okay.
You're getting ahead of us.
Okay. Getting excited.
So let me go. Horseman number 3 is contempt, and that's really criticism on steroids is how I describe it. So that's when things get really nasty, and of course we don't ever want to be seeing that in our relationships. And then the one you're referring to is number 4, which is stonewalling. And so that's the kind of shutting down either by leaving the scene, by just walking away and not engaging with what your partner's trying to talk to you about, or even you might stay there but you throw your hands up in the air and you sort of shut down and disengage from the interaction in some way. So those 4 patterns are, look, to be fair, there's a smattering of them in all of our relationships. Relationships that really struggle have those 4 things happening quite consistently, and certainly couples in that perimenopause phase can be at risk of those behaviours either starting if they haven't been there too much to begin with, or certainly escalating and getting a lot more common and a lot more frequent.
I made you rush through contempt, which I didn't mean to. Number 3. I'd love you to explain what that means and what that might look like.
Sure. I probably did rush through a little bit myself
as
my
well.
So what contempt looks like is it's sort of that real situation where one partner is really elevating themselves to a superior place over the other partner. So things like name calling, mocking their partner, like imitating their voice or imitating the way they say things, even eye rolling, which I know a lot of people, particularly teenagers, are very good at doing. Even eye rolling is a contemptuous behaviour. It's really when you're saying, I'm not interested in what you've got to say, and putting your partner down and elevating yourself as superior in some way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so those sort of 4 things, you see them start to creep in more at this time when people are starting to struggle?
It can certainly happen that way, yes.
Yeah.
And again, I think probably less so if the couple super informed and super educated and realise what's happening. That's probably going to be a really nice buffer to letting those behaviours take hold. But couples who are kind of unaware of what's going on for them and just think that they're starting to fight more and they're starting to look at each other and go, oh gosh, you're really not the person I thought you were, then those couples are going to be really at risk of those behaviours just escalating. Because what happens when we start to feel like we as a couple maybe aren't so good, then we start to invest more in me as a person. We get quite protective of ourselves, and as soon as we get protective of ourselves and we're less caring about our partner, then we're at much greater risk of being critical of them, of not wanting to hear anything they have to say, of walking out on them, of not engaging, because we're really in the space of protecting ourselves at that point. And so we really want couples to stay in that we framework where they're really looking at, hey, we're a unit, it's us against the world kind of thing. And when perimenopause comes along, it's not us against perimenopause. We don't want to turn that into this evil entity, but we do want it to be a sense of this thing's happening to us, and we've got to figure out how to manage it.
One of the things that I see coming out in a lot of my patients is resentment. And that seems to, I don't know, maybe it comes to a head in midlife, or maybe it's just years of exhaustion or the emotional load that we've sort of talked briefly about before. But is that something that you see begin to show up in those sessions?
Yeah. Remember we were talking before about how important repair is in a relationship. So we can't have everything go perfect 24/7. That's just not possible. So all couples are going to have challenges. All couples are going to have conflict. And the key to that not bringing them undone is repair and repairing effectively. And when we see resentment building for a couple, then what we know is they haven't been repairing effectively. So they've had the fight, perhaps, and then they've brushed it under the rug and they've continued on. They've maybe expressed their needs and the partner hasn't changed or hasn't met that need. And so over time, these little things just start to build and build and build until they start to feel quite unhappy and quite disgruntled, if you like, in their position within the relationship. And so the way to prevent resentment is to make sure that those repair processes are working well. And the way to overcome resentment, to be fair, sometimes couples get to a point where they can't and they make a decision to separate and live their lives differently. But couples who are really keen to sort of find their way back together, then the way that we overcome that resentment is, some people would call it rehashing the past, but we do it very carefully so it doesn't feel too awful, is to help them go back to those sort of major conflicts they've had or those major patterns that have really been difficult for them, and to help them repair the hurts that have been caused and to help them redesign how their relationship can look moving forward so that it meets both of their needs better.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we have a partner listening right now, what would be an example of being curious in a situation rather than, I suppose, approaching it in a more negative way? Yeah,
I love that idea of being curious because we're wanting to work out what's going on here. So an example of a way someone can do that is just to ask questions. Just to, maybe not in the heat of the moment. So if your female partner is, I don't know, ranting and raving, so to speak, about something that's going wrong, that's probably not the time to go, do you think your hormones are playing up? That may not land so well. But again, maybe later that afternoon, you could ask some questions. Hey, I've noticed you seem to be feeling a lot more agitated lately. Are you okay? What's going on? Have you noticed that? So asking these sort of really open questions is important. A lot of people will ask questions that kind of are criticism. So, you've been so frustrated lately, get yourself sorted kind of thing. Something like that's not going to go well. But being curious and saying, I'm worried about you. I'm worried that maybe you're going through something at the moment. Is there anything I can do to help? Really opening with that kind of statement would be really useful. So I don't know, people listening have probably heard the I statements thing, it's communication strategies, but they are really, really valuable if you start with a feeling. So if you share with your partner, I'm feeling worried or I'm feeling concerned or I'm feeling upset, then if your partner cares about you, hopefully they'll buy into that. Oh gosh, I want to know more. Help me understand what's happening. So a male partner being concerned about something happening for their female partner can start with that. I'm feeling worried that something might be going on for you, rather than telling her what's happening. You're always cranky all the time. What's going on? That's not going to go well. So start with what you're feeling and then ask your partner what they think is going on and go from there.
Okay. Yeah. So helpful. And again, in perimenopause, I do have a lot of women who present feeling very disconnected, not only, from their partner, but maybe just from life in general. They just don't feel that connection to anything sometimes. But, that disconnection, the instinct can be, I think, in a partnership that people start assigning fault. Well, it's because you're doing this or you're not doing that. And I feel like that can become such a dead end for the relationship. How do we get past that disconnection without it becoming this sort of blaming the other person for that disconnection?
Yeah, I think that sort of detached feeling is certainly something that can come along with this stage of life, and I've experienced that myself. So I sort of feel, as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, if I miss my gel one day, that's exactly how I kind of feel. And so I guess, again, education is that first step, helping the woman to really recognize, hey, this is probably a symptom of something that your body's going through, not a symptom of your relationship. So writing that out and not making any massive decisions right now is really important to sort of get all of that sorted as best you can and see where you land. But also being you sort of asked specifically about kind of blaming each other and that kind of dynamic starting to happen. So really trying to, once again, be gracious with one another, to really try and understand, hey, this is my person who's going through this thing here. This is my person who I've been with for all these years, and what I'm seeing happen for them is something that they're going through. It's not a choice necessarily that they're making. And then in reverse, hey, I'm going through some stuff here. So although my partner's snoring is now really, really agitating me, he's actually not doing anything different. And so I might need to ask him to sleep in a different room so I can get some sleep, but I can ask that in a careful way. I don't have to all of a sudden think that he's the root cause of all of these feelings I'm having. So again, I feel like I went round in circles a little bit there, but I think it does just come back to that awareness and that education and that presence of mind to go, there's more to this story than just the face value of how I'm feeling right now and what he's doing that may have triggered that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, this is a really strong theme that I see in my clinic. So yes, people come to see me because they're not sleeping, or, they've got hot flushes, or they're feeling very anxious. They come with a whole lot of symptoms. But I have to say it is at least a half of women in that very first consultation will be very concerned about their relationship, that they're going to lose their relationship. And, someone will even quote to me, because they hear it now being talked about online, that this is a real peak for relationship breakdown, and divorces happen and all that kind of thing. And I do think that women are very worried. That they can see that perhaps things are slipping away. But, I suppose what I want people to take away from this conversation is that not every relationship will be saved, and probably not every relationship should be saved, but to move the narrative to what's wrong with us, to what's happening in this situation, and is it something that there's actually a will to work through, and rather that thinking of it as like some kind of personal failing.
Definitely. That idea, I love that shift of what's wrong with us to what's happening to us, because it very much is something that that couples can really kind of grab onto, that idea of, oh, hang on, something's going on here. It's not about you and me. It's not about us so much. And I think helping them make that shift is really important. And I think that we don't want either of them to be using sort of this menopause thing as a get out of jail free card either. So we don't want the female partner to be like, oh, well, I'm in perimenopause, I can do whatever I like and I don't have to worry about him anymore, it's my time kind of thing. We don't want it to be an excuse for bad behaviour. But at the same time, we don't want the male partner to be like, oh, that's just the menopause talking, I don't need to listen to her, she'll get through it. When she gets past it, she won't care about that anymore. So we still want couples to kind of be mindful that they need to stick together through the process. They need to keep listening to each other. They need to keep looking after each other through this process, and I guess have that sense of goodwill. So I think the couples who do best are the couples that really cherish one another, and that's a word that John Gottman uses a lot. That idea of cherishing your partner, and I just love it that I think I said before, the person that you're with, they're a living human being. You know, they're breathing and they're functioning and they've got their own stuff going on. And if couples are able to really see each other that way and really be able to tune in to what's happening for both of them through this period, then I think that really goes a long way to helping them sort of not fall into that trap of just it all falls apart because it's all too hard sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, at the heart of that is probably one of the greatest human desires, really, which is to be cherished.
Mm.
You know, like people will say, like, I want to be loved, but, you know, what does that mean? But really, you want someone to cherish you, that you are, that they will have your back, that you're everything, that they're excited to talk to you, that they're excited to be with you, that they think they know your failings, but they still think you're awesome, basically. Yeah. I think that's what everyone wants, isn't it? I think sometimes couples or women will express to me that they are finding it very hard to convince their partner to go to counselling. I think there can be a feeling of, oh, we're not that bad. That sounds like it's a bit over the top. Or it can be the opposite. No, I think we're done and I've got nothing more to give to this. And then the other fear seems to be around that the psychologist or the marriage counsellor is going to take sides.
Yeah.
And they're going to someone's going to feel ganged up on. And obviously you've got so much experience in this space. You know, if someone was listening and was worried about those things, could you talk to that for me?
Certainly. And if a little aside, they're my favourite referrals to get when I have a gentleman come in who's not keen and is only there kind of under sufferance. I love the challenge of winning them over. And most of the time...
You're going to regret saying this, Natalie. You're going to be like,
Most of the time, I do, I think. But certainly I can appreciate that it's a very confronting kind of idea. It's confronting enough for people to sit down with a therapist one-on-one, let alone to sit down with their partner and kind of, I think a lot of people see it as airing their dirty laundry. But what I really want people to understand is when you do come into the therapy room, it's very much about understanding what's happening in the relationship and really even-handedly looking at the needs of both people. Even when it is perimenopause and something's more happening for the woman, it's also really that idea of, look, it is happening to both of you. And so I would always suggest that you if you're really feeling uncomfortable, you're really not feeling sure, but your partner's desperately wanting you to go along, have a phone call first with the therapist. Most people would offer that, to have a 5 or 10 minute call just to ask, look, what's going to happen? Can you run me through the first session, exactly what can I expect, and have a bit of a chat to them about your concerns, or just get a bit of a feeling, does this person feel like they know what they're talking about? I think that's one of the main things for men, is that they just want to know that who they're sitting down with has some competence and has a capability to be able to know what they're doing. So that sort of touching base by phone beforehand can be really helpful. And then the other thing to keep in mind is there's no contract in place. So if you go along to the first session and it doesn't feel right or you don't feel comfortable, then you can always try a different therapist or make a different plan. So I would always say try it once, see how you go. And usually in that first session you can get a sense of whether it's going to be something that you're able to kind of show up for again, if you like. But I think one of the things that people don't realise is we actually have quite a lot of fun in our therapy sessions. Sometimes, obviously, we have to talk about really hard stuff, and sometimes that can be very emotional and can be very difficult. But usually if we get somewhere good at the end of it, it can be really cathartic and can feel really nice by the time the couple leaves the therapy room. But a lot of the time, like we're really... having a bit of a joke, having a bit of a muck around, like really almost looking at the relationship through a scientific lens where we're all trying to figure it out together and work out what can go differently. So it's not as heavy the whole time, the therapeutic process, as I think people fear that it might be.
Here are my 3 takeaways from today's conversation with Natalie King. Perimenopause doesn't just change hormones, it changes emotional capacity, communication, and connection within relationships. Relationship strain in midlife is often a capacity issue, not a compatibility issue. And couples who stay connected are the ones who name the transition early and adapt together. If this episode resonated, share it with your partner or with a friend who's wondering why their relationship suddenly feels harder. This information is general in nature and not intended to replace personalized medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider regarding your specific situation. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, and I'll see you next time on All About You.